welcome to DCA committee. Could I particularly welcome the public? We only have 3 brief, simple rules. Firstly, if you've got a mobile, please switch off. Secondly, if you need to use the toilets on either side of the entrance. Thirdly, no fire alarm is planned, so if it goes off, sadly, it will be the real thing. So we exit via the main entrance, walk down the ramp to the right, and assemble by Bristol Cathedral. Okay. Could I just mention it's always good to see people here, of course, in the public stalls, etc. But I'm sure you'll have strong views either for or anti-planning applications we may consider. If I can remind people that everyone is entitled to their view in a democracy, so in public forum, can you listen to them in silence, please? Thirdly, can I just say it's a delight to have the Chief Planner, Simone Wilding, to my right. Simone was already blooded at the DCB committee earlier this month, so hopefully she doesn't find members too daunting. And members may be aware, we've had previously her colleague Lewis Cook attending and presenting at committee. You may be aware already that while Peter Westbury is on sabbatical, Lewis has taken over his role on major projects, so we'll see more and more of we'll see more and more of Lewis, I'm sure. Apologies for absence and subs. Ali?
Yes, Councillor Eddy. Apologies received from Councillor Chris Jackson with Councillor Breckles as substitute.
Can I welcome Fabian? It's good to see you. Can I also say it's welcome to Councillor O'Rourke. I hope you find this committee quite fulfilling, of course. And can I add a personal note during the ill health of the Lord Mayor? Thank you for your noble substitutions and the work you've been doing. Do any members have any declarations of interest? No. Fabian.
Just a quick one. I did notice that Agile are involved in the application. I have had dealings with them about something completely different. They haven't we have not discussed this application at all, so I only found out about their involvement when I picked up the papers on last night. So I retain an open mind.
Thank you for that. We move on to minutes of the last meetings. We have a bumper crop free, of course. I'm going to propose something slightly different. Normally we have public forum later in the agenda, but members will know that it would seem absurd and illogical not to hear residents' public forum. So I'm going to propose from the chair this is temporary suspension of standing orders to enable us to move that forward. I'm also going to ask, I'm going to take it in a different order, the 9th of August first, then the 31st of May, and then the 5th of July. And I'm going to, after the 31st of May, after the public forum, invite the council's legal representative to respond to set questions. That will apply to all members. Councillor Hants was very keen to that. And then Louise from Democratic Services will suggest a possible way forward. Thereafter, I am minded to move to a vote and to see whether or not there is support for those fees.
Sorry, can you clarify something, Chair? You said something about responding to set questions and then something subsequently about member debate. Could you clarify that? Because that's not entirely what was reflected in your email. I'm sorry. So your suggestion is that the legal officer comments on the minutes and then we have some kind of... can you clarify?
Roy.
Chair, perhaps it'll help if I say this is how I envisage it will work. If you have something different in mind, then that will take priority. You have public representation, some of which deal with the minutes that you're being asked to approve tonight. They raise certain questions about those minutes and whether they should be approved or not. And following that, what I'd anticipate is members might wish to pursue some of it, or all of those issues, to ask questions of me, because arguably I'm the officer best placed to deal with the questions as they've arisen from public representations, and to allay any concerns members may have about the accuracy or otherwise of the minutes, or any related legal or procedural issues. And then following those questions, hopefully there will be greater clarity on how the minutes stand and what their status is and what decisions were taken, and then members can hopefully move forward to a decision as to whether or not to approve the two sets of minutes that are in particular linked to the Broad Walk application.
Is that clearer, Fee?
One more question, sorry. I understand that we're asking you questions of clarity. Will we have the opportunity to discuss this at all, or is Louise going to... This is an unusual situation, so forgive me if I'm feeling my way through it, because we've never done this before. There's never been quite such concern over minutes in my experience, and probably anybody else's. So we have the opportunity to ask you questions of clarity. Will there be an opportunity for members to debate afterwards?
Well, sorry, Alan? Yeah.
He said, I think Louise is putting the amendment in, I think. And Louise is going to suggest an potentially amended minutes?
It depends what comes forward, of course. I believe, actually, we didn't feel we wanted to preempt or foreclose on the public statements, and they raised various issues. So Roy's going to respond to that initially, then take questions more forensically from members about things they feel he may not have responded as fully to.
Oops, I'm getting nods from this side, so I think we're okay with that. Thank you, Richard. As you understand, this is uncharted territory, so we wanted to be very clear about what we're doing. Thank you.
No. As you know, Fee, I recognise that, and I feel it's important we're as inclusive as possible, of course. So can I formally move temporary suspension of standing order subject to that? And Fee, are you happy to second? Are members in support? Aye. So can I first of all move to the set for the 9th of August of this year? I have one public forum, or rather public forum questions from Robin Hambleton. Robin, do you want to come to the mic in the centre? It's been turned on, so you don't need to switch. You've asked a series of questions. I've responded as best I can. You have a right to a supplementary, of course. It may be helpful if I just make one brief statement first, and that is SCAN, the organisation which was opposed to the present development or recent development proposed at St Christopher's School, raised issues with the one paragraph, the transport element in the minutes, and they felt they were unable to accurately respond, although they had fears, because the present council YouTube of the meeting, the footage, isn't currently available, and as I confirmed, having raised it with officers, that's because the council's received a legal complaint. That's presently being dealt with. My view is it's unfair on members, it's unfair on SCAN and the public to actually take it forward until we have a chance to see the real what was said. So I'm proposing that we actually defer that to our next meeting on the 1st of November, by which time the YouTube footage should be available and you should have a chance to comment fully. Robin.
Fine, well, thank you very much, Chairman. Good evening, councillors, and welcome, Simone. I hope you enjoy your time here. So my name is Robin Hambleton, and I'm speaking on behalf of SCAN, as you say, Councillor. And on behalf of SCAN, I'd like to thank you for taking real consideration and concern about the inaccuracies that we identified in the minutes of the 9th of August. And thank you, Chairman, for acknowledging in writing that there are inaccuracies in the minutes. We welcome your suggestion of postponing the endorsement of the minutes till November. I think that's very helpful, particularly because of what you said about the video not being available, so we appreciate that. I'd just like to make a very short remark. I know you've got a big agenda here. We're really concerned about the parking problems in Westbury Park and the stress on the area. Hundreds of objections came in.
Sorry, Robbie, as you know, I'm trying to be as helpful as possible,
Yeah.
but this is supplementaries, not statements. So I'm very happy to respond to a supplementary question.
Okay, I'm very happy to adopt, that's fine. The two questions that we've given you are on the paper. I think you've addressed the first one, so thank you for that. My second question relates to the second question, where there is some sensitivity here about the video, but are you able, Chairman, to indicate when you might expect this very important video to be back online for citizens to see, because it's so important to have a transparent process in planning.
I couldn't agree more, Robin. I asked officers this today. They weren't able then to give a definitive response, but they're working, and I will certainly be working behind the scenes to get it online as soon as possible, probably within weeks. The fact that the next meeting's on the 1st of November gives us a bit of a breathing space.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. So can I formally move that those minutes from the 9th of August be deferred to the 1st of November, subject to comments, etc., and the availability of the YouTube coverage? Can I have a seconder? Andrew, thanks. All those in favour? Unanimous. So I'll move on now to the 31st of May minutes. We have a number of public forum items here which have been circulated. Can I remind members, all formal statements have been actually circulated to members. So if you could you have a minute to verbally scrutinise and summarise your views. So 1 minute. Any more reading cuts into the time of other people, so I would urge you to do that. The first person I have is Helen Morris-Evans. Helen?
Hello, it's me again to talk about Broadwalk again. Not as a conspiracy theorist or a NIMBY, as some might have you believe, just as a local person who lives in Knoll with her family and who cares about its incredible community, and as someone who knows it deserves better than what the current developers have in store. It might surprise you to know that I really don't actually want to be here again. And yet here I am, participating in local democracy in the hope that it actually makes a difference this time. Despite not wanting to come today, I felt compelled to. I felt I needed to stand up in front of each and every member of DCA so I could look you in the eye as I make this request, hoping that in doing so, it might make a difference. On the 31st of May, this committee unanimously voted to reject the Broadwalk development in its current state. I was there. You were there. The video evidence backs up that this was the case. At no point was it ever stated that you were voting to defer the decision.
Sorry.
The word defer was never even
Helen,
used. So I ask
Helen, could I ask you, please? Thank you. Again,
public servants, integrity and honesty
right,
matter.
fine. Thank you. The next person is Laura Chapman.
Hello again, a bit like Helen. I'm sure I've got a reputation in this room, even for those of you who haven't sat here before. And as per my reputation, I started off writing reams and reams of exactly why you shouldn't sign off the minutes today. But actually, I don't think I need to. I think I can look, like Helen said, look you in the eye. You guys, you did the right thing for us on the 31st of May. You listened to us, you responded, and you actually upheld what the community asked you to do. And this isn't about debate today, this is about facts. This is about the simple fact of what happened on the 31st of May.
For Philippa.
Sorry, I'm going to rewind it, because I've mucked it up.
We just have a formal vote on that, just to count.
Yes, so we're formally moving that, so it's formally to refuse, so it's for the refusal or against or abstain.
For the refusal.
Laura, thank you for your time. You've had your minute. Can I now just call... Laura, please, you're stopping other people.
I don't think they mind,
move to the next
I really don't think they mind.
Thank you.
But if you didn't hear the word defer, you know which one, you know what to do.
Could I move to Suzanne Audrey, please?
I had a statement perhaps saying what was said at that meeting, but you know what was said at that meeting, all of you. I agree this isn't a question of debate, this is fact. I don't know what pressure is being put on people, but if anybody here says that it wasn't refused on the 31st of May, that wasn't the vote, there's something gone hideously wrong. So I've still got a green light, so I'm just begging you all, just be honest. This is going to go to judicial review, and I just can't see how not being honest tonight is going to help that judicial review from the perspective of Bristol City Council. Thank you.
Can I thank you for keeping to your time, Suzanne? Councillor Plowden.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, colleagues. Since the meeting on 5th of July, I've made it my business to understand the rules governing this committee and the protocols guiding it, all the more than I did before. Getting the minutes exactly right is a rule, and wishing that the guidance protocols have been followed is not a good reason for the minutes to be an inaccurate and untrue record. I hope you accept that the minutes need to record a clear, unanimous refusal. I don't know how any other course of action can be explained to the public who are now so concerned about this. The proposed buildings may only cast a long shadow over their neighbours in Redcatch Park, but the actions of this committee may cast a long shadow over the whole city. I hope that we can get some clarity as to whether or not the committee was actually able to make the decision it made on the 5th of July. And I sincerely hope it can be unequivocally settled today for all our sakes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Can I thank those who gave public forum statements? Can I move to the legal officer? Obviously, Roy, you've heard those statements, you've asserted them before. It would be helpful if you responded to some of the charges laid.
Yes, well, perhaps not regard them as charges, Chair, but certainly points made. And the representations we've heard placed a lot of emphasis on facts and what actually happened on the 31st of May. And that is obviously important. And
Could I ask the public gallery, we've had public forum, please actually listen to people and respect their ability to speak whatever their view.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of the facts and in terms of what happened on the 31st of May, I'm about to read from a transcript of the meeting of 31st of May, actually a transcript produced by firm of solicitors acting for objectors to the scheme. So they add to the context that we've been given by quotations and recordings. So before the extract we heard just now, I'm reading from the transcript now. Chair, you said, we now move to a proposal for refusal from the floor. I will take that. So perhaps the proposer could indicate some reasons in general terms. You are aware that officers under our protocol have to take it away and bring it back to a future meeting with the reasons for overturning the officer recommendation. And then the discussion is passed to Councillor Hans. Councillor Hans says, I would suggest that we refuse it on the grounds of over-densification and that the dwellings per hectare exceeds our policy. And then there is discussion about clarification about who's moving and seconding the motion. So that is clarified. Chair, you say, so that's formally moved. By definition, your amendment, there's a reference to Councillor Plowden's amendment on restricted parking zones. There's then a question to Peter Westbury, the planning officer on duty at the time. Are you comfortable enough to go away with that lead? Mr. Westbury responds yes. So I would suggest that there's a clear indication in the extracts that I've read out that there is direct reference to the process by which a decision to indicate refusal on the 31st of May is to be reported back to a future meeting. And that, as we know from the history of this matter, is what happened on the 5th of July. So relying on those extracts from the meeting that, by the sound of it, many, if not all of us, were all at, there is a clear decision-making process which is directly referred to by the chair of the committee, of which the committee is aware and which forms the basis for the way in which this application was over time determined. So taking those as the facts, as what happened on the 31st of May, I would argue that the committee on the 5th of July was entirely entitled to reach a decision on the application. But even if that is all disregarded, even if those words hadn't been said, even if the council did not have a protocol for cooling off period, even if there weren't constitutional arrangements which suggested that applications which are refused contrary to officer recommendation come back to committee, the legal position of the council is clear. Even if there was a formal decision to refuse on the 31st of May, backed up by detailed reasons for refusal at that point in time, that would not prevent the council, as local planning authority, from subsequently reaching a different decision at any time before the formal decision notice on the planning application was issued. We are at a point in time now where that decision notice hasn't been issued because there are negotiations over the 106 agreement. But as local planning authority, this council has the entire freedom to revisit any decision that it has made before that decision is noticed, even if that decision made at committee is expressed as a basic refusal backed up by detailed reasons for refusal.
Could I ask you please to be quiet to allow the officer to speak? Roy?
Thank you, Chair. So just to sort of crystallise the 2 points I've made. One, in terms of what happened on the 31st of May, the transcript shows that the cooling off protocol was directly referred to and the arrangements for determination of this application at a future meeting were clarified. Secondly, even if none of that had taken place, that would not have prevented the council from making the decision it did on the 5th of July.
This is a meeting for members. We've had public forum before. I'm going to pose 2 questions, and then Vihats has got my attention first. Roy, clearly you've established on the 31st of May, reference was made to the protocol. Can you identify any ways in which that protocol's procedures were not met?
From the transcript, no, because it's referred to. But even if it had not been directly referred to, the Council's constitution anticipates that protocol will apply in the situation we had on the 31st of May, namely a recommendation for approval overturned by the committee.
Fine. My second question is, obviously the minutes have been disputed by some people. Legally, what is the position? I mean, was actually permission granted on the 5th of July, or is it subject to actually the minutes being approved?
Chair, I'd respond to that by saying that the decision taken and the minutes of a meeting, while linked, are essentially two different things. We have a situation where a decision was taken on the 31st of May, a different decision was taken on the 5th of July, and in the case of both those meetings, the minutes still remain not agreed by this committee. But even in the absence of agreed minutes, those decisions still have legal effect. The decision to grant planning permission on the 5th of July remains a decision to grant, even though the minutes for that meeting have not been formally approved. And that decision of the 5th of May is something that the Council's officers are entitled to rely on when negotiating the Section 106 and ultimately issuing planning permission.
Thank you. VHATS.
Can you clarify for me the purpose of this section of our agenda? My understanding was that we are looking at the minutes of that meeting to see whether they're accurate or not. What we are not looking at is their implications, what they referred to, whether it was understood by interpreting these minutes. My understanding was that we are looking at these minutes from the 31st of May and saying, is that an accurate reflection of what was said or not? Not what it could be interpreted as, what the implications are, which is a separate matter. But my understanding was, is this accurate or not? Can you clarify, if we agree the minutes or disagree with the minutes, what it is we're actually agreeing to? Are we agreeing that this is a factual record of what happened, or are we agreeing to the implications that flow from it? Because you seem to be spreading your net rather wide here, if I may say so. I was under the impression we were simply looking at whether this was an accurate reflection or not. Thank you.
Chair, as I understand it from the representations we've had, I don't mean to oversimplify the argument, but I think that the point being made by numerous people is that the decision of the 31st of May was a binding decision to refuse the application. And
I'm sorry, that's not my question.
Ask the officer to speak. Please, I'm afraid I'm going to give you a warning. Please, we want this to be a public meeting. I want every member of the public to stay here and participate or listen to what's going on. But we can only do that if we respect people when they're speaking. Roy.
Thank you, Chair. The point as I understood it, or the broad point that's being made, is that there was a definitive and final decision taken on the 31st of May to refuse this application, and that therefore that decision could not be departed from on the 5th of July. For the reasons I've given you earlier, I do not consider that that's a correct representation. But what we are looking at now is the minutes for those two meetings, and the minutes for the first meeting record a refusal. The discussion at the meeting clearly referred to an application of the cooling off protocol, and the 5th of July meeting minutes referred to a decision to approve the application. So that is the decision-making process over a period of weeks that I'm describing as a way of assisting you in identifying whether the minutes that are before you now are truly accurate or whether they need to be adjusted.
I'm sorry, but that fails to respond to my question. I'm not asking...
could I ask the public gallery, you may have strong views, but please allow people to pose their questions, don't boo, don't clap also, because that delays the response and it does no one any good, of course. Fee?
I'm sorry, my understanding was that we were looking at these minutes to decide whether an accurate record of what had happened, not their implications or whether the process had been followed. I thought that was purely what we were looking at. The implications that may flow from that are a separate debate, I thought. I thought what we were looking at, and and I understand that you believe that there's been an interpretation of these requests to shift the minutes, but my understanding is we are simply looking at this document and going, does that reflect what we said, yes or no? I thought that was all that we were looking at here. Can you clarify, please? Thank you.
Well, the transcript that I referred to shows that a decision was taken on the 31st of May that the application be refused. The decision, as recorded on the 5th of July, records that a decision was made that the application be approved. So in terms of the basics of the decisions made, those were the outcomes on those occasions. As I've tried to explain, there are other aspects to the discussion, which if you are discussing what should go into the minutes, may be relevant to what goes in the minutes.
Paula O'Rourke.
Hello. Just following on from what Fee has said. What I thought I was coming here to do today was to decide whether this was an accurate minute or not. So I wasn't actually at the meeting. I'm new to the committee, so I'm a bit inexperienced. But I think I have to tell you, I have been a teacher of English for 20 years. So I do understand that I think what people are trying to clarify here today is the wording in the minutes says that people were minded to refuse. But actually, I mean, I watched the video very carefully, and at least 4 times people said the word refuse. We have decided to refuse. The motion is to refuse. And somebody said overturn the officer's report. So that's it. That's simply it. What we want to find out is, on that day, the public who were here thought and believed that the decision was made to refuse, and that the report was that. So the subsequent meeting in July, the report that came back followed on from that, because when I read that report, it quite clearly just comes up with the reasons for refusal. So to all intents and purposes, our protocols and our procedures allowed the public to believe that the decision was made that day. I believed it when I watched it. I think all of the people who were here on the committee that day believed that they had made a decision to refuse the application, and that they were going to come back and then they were going to work on the reasons. So that's why I think the minutes should be amended so that it says the decision was to refuse, not minded to refuse. And I think it's that simple on this point.
I take the point entirely on that. If we're talking about the distinction between minded to refuse and refuse, if we take a hypothetical situation in which on the 5th of July, following presentation of Mr. Westbury's reasons for refusal, the committee there had decided that the application should indeed be refused, that would have been the refusal. So on the 31st of May, the committee would have been minded to refuse, subject to Mr. Westbury providing the full details for reasons for refusal, and then the formal refusal would have been on the 5th of July. Well, we know events turned out differently, but that would have been the process.
But the counter-argument to what you're saying, Roy, is that, you may sound like semantics, but it's very important here that if at the beginning of a debate I'm minded to think one way or the other, that's, I'm minded to. And then I listen to the debate and then I make my mind up. I'm no longer minded to. So I think it really is very important, because having watched the debate, it was quite clear that all members unanimously said that they had come to the decision, they had decided to refuse. And I think it's really important that we make that point and that that's true, because that's what I watched on the video.
Well, it might be helpful to point out, and as you say, I know you've done DC training, but it's been a while, I guess, doing when you've been on DC committees. But for over 4 years, we've operated this system, this protocol, and if there's any determination by committee, which actually overturns an officer recommendation, we use the protocol. In 100% of cases, it's referred to the next meeting where members will have a chance to look at sustainable grounds for refusal or approval, of course. And it's operated that. The reason it has primarily has been because officers were genuinely concerned about members sometimes deciding to reject their recommendation and refuse. And actually, the grounds were not sustainable at appeal. Very often they were overturned, and very often costs were awarded against the Bristol taxpayer. So that's what, I mean, the last two cases were very recently on DCB. This, I think, is only the second time in a couple of years it's operated on DCA, but certainly it's worked between both committees for over 4 years.
I think Andrew.
Andrew Varney.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think on the 5th of July, I described the minutes of the 31st as being ambiguous, and the case officer agreed that actually they could be misconstrued. Now, at the moment, I don't believe the minutes are a true and accurate reflection of what was said on the 31st of May, and I can't support them in their current form. However, we do have an alternative form of words, which does appear to have been agreed to by Peter Westbury and also by others on the committee. And I'm just wondering if we could possibly have, if I could propose that we have a vote on accepting an alternative form of words, which we've seen in the public gallery this evening, if that's possible.
The issue is, there is a process. First of all, we have these questions to the officers. I will then test the mood of the meeting to see, is there actually agreement for approving the existing draft minutes? If there isn't, then we move to actually some other form. So that would be the moment to actually, for you to move or propose an amendment. John Keeter.
Could I just ask one other point?
Yeah.
Sorry, John. Just regarding voting on the minutes, I'm not sure what the convention is. If members were not present at the meeting, do they have to abstain on voting on the minutes? Is there a convention with that?
Can I invite Ali or Louise?
Yeah, it would probably be wise to abstain. On that basis, because you weren't
to
there.
be honest, the position is very clearly actually, if there is usually a formal site visit, of course, and that requires that only members who went on the site visit could attend and actually vote in the subsequent determination. There isn't any actual legal or statutory or even best advice code as far as non-presence at a meeting. I mean, on that basis, obviously, there are two members here who wouldn't be able to vote, and they're looking presumably at the reports in front of them and the public forum they've heard, and hearing the question, the information from the officers, and in my view, they're entitled to make up their view. John Keeter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had two questions for Roy, if possible. One was that I understand that the minutes are meant to summarise the meeting, but as it's so contentious, from a legal point of view, couldn't we just, and I know this might come after, just include a transcript of what was said and then that is what it is? And the second question was, as you said, that the council can revisit a decision until a notice has been made. If the notice hasn't already been made, does that then mean that that decision could be made again?
Chair, if I can, I'll deal with those in reverse order because the second point's freshest in my mind. Short answer, yes, until planning permission is granted in the form of the issue of a decision notice. The application remains technically undetermined and it can be revisited by the local planning authority as decision-making body. What was the first point?
Just that I understand the minutes are meant to summarise the meeting, but instead of us wasting so much time debating, because I'm assured that from a procedural point of view, things have followed the correct processes and the committee has done what it should do in the right order legally. So if it's just about agreeing wording and there's no legal implications to the outcome of the meetings, could on this occasion we just not include a transcript of what was actually said and everybody's appeased?
Yes, well, what's in the minutes is a matter for this committee to decide what to approve. It's a convention that minutes aren't supposed to be a fully detailed and accurate record of the entire discussion. They are meant to be a record of a summary of the discussion and the decisions made. And if there are errors in that summary or errors in the record of the decision made, then that will be picked up by this committee in the case of these minutes in the usual way. So there is clearly a process by which the accuracy of the minutes can be assured, but they are not a full verbatim recollection of events as discussed. Minutes can be long or brief. The minutes at this council are much longer than other minutes at other local planning authorities I've worked for. So in many cases, the transcript can be helpful, and in this case, the transcript clearly shows the nature of the discussion which led to consideration of the potential grounds for refusal, which did include a reference to the cooling off protocol. So the suggestion that that wasn't an issue is clearly not founded in fact.
Could I just underscore Roy's reply about the length of minutes? If every minutes were actually a verbatim record, they usually constitute volumes of War and Peace and probably end up destroying an entire Amazonian rainforest. So I think the fact they actually summarise the key issues is a relevant factor. Fabian. Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much. I've also suggested a couple of additions to the minutes for clarity. Would now be the moment to mention those or later?
Please do. No.
Councillor Varney suggested amendments, and you said to him that we needed to vote on the original minutes first.
We'll have to have a vote on the actual resolution, but only after we finish with questions. And then it depends whether a vote for approval was won or lost, of course. But if it's lost, we now need to move immediately to his proposed amendment.
Sorry, Philip, I'm not trying to bust in, but it's just where I thought we were voting on the minutes as proposed first, and then if it went down, then come into the amendments.
But realistically, since members, she's asked whether she should raise it later or now, raise it now.
Thank you. Yes, so I, because of the, because of the ambiguity and because it's not necessarily easy to understand what the minutes are saying, I went back and looked at a very helpful email I had from Democratic Services explaining the proposed wording, and I found that really helpful. It's just 2 bullet points, so I was suggesting perhaps adding those to the minutes for clarity and to make it easier for everyone to understand. And I emailed those to Democratic Services. I think you've got them. Have you got them there? Yeah.
Louise, could you comment?
I do have them here. From a Democratic Services point of view, obviously, the convention is that we summarise the business of a meeting, and that's what we've been doing since the cooling off period came into being. The suggestion is that actually, because members were unanimously minded to refuse, they couldn't actually take a decision at that time because they didn't have refusal the reasons for refusal before them. So that's why Democratic Services used that terminology as they would normally do. The word deferral is a procedural matter only. It wasn't said, it's a procedural matter. So the process of deferral refers to a matter of procedure, as the decision couldn't take place until the application had been returned to committee at a future meeting. So it was just whether you would like to add that to the record as an explanation for the reason for the wording of the minute.
Could we please keep to members? Tom?
Thanks. I feel like we're going around in circles a little bit, and there's a lot of talk of, processes and protocols that are followed or not. But I just wanted to get your interpretation of this, Roy, from the committee procedure rules. It's 14.3, which is on the form of minutes. And in that file, 14.3 form of minutes reads, minutes will contain all motions and amendments in the exact form and order the chair put them. Now, I appreciate that, if we went through and recorded every last minute, it would be very long and we surmise most of the debate, but that's pretty clear in my mind. That point is relating specifically to motions and amendments in the exact form, and that's, where I'm at.
Shall I respond, Roy?
No, Chair. I'm looking at the minutes now for the 31st of May, and most of them consist of the debate on the application, and then it goes, in accordance with convention, Councillor Richard Eddy asked for any councillor to propose the officer's recommendation for approval, but no councillor moved it. That's what happened with the recommendation for approval. Councillor Hans moved, seconded by Councillor Andrew Varney, and it was. So the nature of the motion advanced by Councillor Hans is not referred to. It's just the minutes just describe that a motion from them came in, and then it refers to the decision, and we have the words that are at issue: resolve unanimously that the committee is minded to refuse the application on the grounds of the likely proposed density of housing per hectare. So that's a reference back to Councillor Hans's suggested reason for refusal. You've already had my view on minded to and how important that is or it isn't, but I'm not sure there's any point at which these minutes are a misrepresentation of the motion that was put forward by Councillor Hans, because it's clear from what I've read out that the motion was to refuse on the grounds of the likely proposed density of housing. So in those terms, I would say that was an accurate representation of the motion, which met the requirements of the council's processes.
I'm conscious, I think there's a desire among members to actually move forward and to test the mood of the chamber to see whether there's support for this, or if not, to move to an amended recommendation. So in an effort to test the mood of the chamber, the recommendation is for the officer's copy of the minutes. So the answer is to vote for, against, or abstain. Can I formally propose it with, they're not actually amendments, but Councillor Philippi Hume's two comments are clarifications that are added to the minutes, of course, which I think make that clear. Do you want to?
I'm sorry, but the public hasn't seen these amendments, so I don't think that's okay. Either we vote on them as they are.
You've seen it because it's been emailed, but to be fair, I think you make a fair point. Louise, could you read them?
Yes, Chair. When members usually bring forward amendments to minutes, I don't think you usually share them.
They're clarification.
Clarification points. Okay. Yeah. So if you wanted to add some clarification to the 31st of May minutes, you could explain that the resolution notes as follows, that members were unanimously minded to refuse but could not take a decision as the reasons for refusal were not before them. The process of deferral is a matter of procedure as the decision could not take place until the application had returned to committee at a future meeting. So that would be the notes to the resolution.
That underlines the information, the advice I'm given by Roy, etc. So could I, just to test it to see whether we move on or not, could I formally move that with those 2 notes of clarifications? Philippa, are you prepared to second that? Yeah? Yes, you are. Right, could I move, so it's for, against or abstain. Can I vote for Fabian? Yes, you are. Yes, I made it quite well, in which case I'm quite happy to work on the basis, but it's not legal. I personally think in that case you wouldn't vote on it, and Paul O'Rourke wouldn't participate.
Could I just ask Fabian, as a sort of a councillor to councillor, have you watched the videos and?
I haven't.
I mean, do you feel informed? I mean, if you feel carefully.
I was only agreed to substitute on this meeting yesterday, so I've only read the papers and that's it.
I'm perfectly happy just to actually, on the basis that I don't think there's any legal reason, there's no statutory reason. But
given I've not seen the videos, I'll abstain, just to be. So I can't be accused of making a judgment of something I haven't actually seen. I think that's fair.
But I shall not take votes for either members who weren't there, for members of the committee at the time, weren't present, of course. So it's been, I'm voting in favour.
Sorry, Chair, can you just clarify? Are you saying then that I can't vote?
Yes.
But we've just said, first, you're changing your mind here very quickly.
I'm not changing.
You said that you didn't care whether people voted. And when I said to Councillor Breckles, have you actually watched the video? And in all honesty, thank you for saying that. He said he hasn't.
Not interested
so then
in
my
having
democratic right to vote for this, having spent all the hours watching it so that I can do my due diligence here today, is being denied me. I mean, Richard, you did say that you didn't mind which way it went until suddenly one person hasn't prepared.
People should actually exclude themselves, but if Councillor Breckles is minded that way, Councillor Varney.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate what Paula said. Actually, I think Fabian, fantastic. Thank you so much for your honesty and for abstaining. I think that's the right thing to do. But Paula has made it pretty clear that she's watched the videos, she's looked at the minutes, so I don't see any reason why she couldn't vote on this occasion. She's got the information.
Personally, I disagree with Louise's comment, but I'm prepared to accept that if that's the individual decision on members. So I'm voting for, Councillor Hume's voting for, Councillor Hants.
As that's not what was said, I'm voting against. Thank you.
Councillor O'Rourke.
I'll be voting against.
Councillor Halfway.
Against.
Councillor Varney.
Against.
Councillor Geeta.
Against.
Councillor Hussain.
For.
Right. So on that basis, I believe it's been lost, the proposed minutes. Can I actually have Councillor Varney proposing his amended minutes?
Thank you very much, Chairman. So yes, I want to propose the amended minutes as we saw displayed earlier in the auditorium. So basically, that it's resolved unanimously that the application be refused on the grounds of the proposed density of housing per hectare, and that the application would return to a future meeting to consider the officer's suggested reasons for refusal. I believe that's a more accurate version of what happened at the meeting. Thank you.
That's validly proposed. Is there a seconder, Councillor Hants? Are officers happy with that? Is that valid?
Yeah, we can accept the amendment. We probably will need to put a note on to say that, yeah, the notes that we'd previously said, because at the time, members didn't have the opportunity to make a formal decision.
Fine. So I'm voting against. Councillor Hume?
Philippa, please can you address me and not stare into the public gallery?
Sorry, I was just trying to work it out in my head.
We're moving Councillor Varney's amended proposal, a difference of wording.
I'm going to abstain. My head's fine.
Councillor Hussain?
I'm going to abstain.
Councillor Geeta?
4.
Councillor Varney?
4.
Councillor Halfway?
Yep, I was there. It's what I heard 4.
Councillor O'Rourke?
That's what it was on the video. 4.
Councillor Hats?
Surprise, 4.
Then the amended resolution and the minutes are passed. So could I finally move to the 5th of July minutes? That's proposed by the officers. Can I formally move those? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Varney, thanks. So I'll move to the vote. Sorry, Councillor Halfway.
Can I just check if there are any implications between the interaction of the 2 minutes given what we've resolved?
Roy.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at the 5th of July minutes now.
Or should we defer these till the next meeting?
No, because as I've described, the 5th of July meeting is effectively the second stage in your decision-making process. You've clarified the form of the decision of the 31st of May as you wish to see it recorded, and the 5th of July record of these minutes is intended as the next stage in the process. I mean, I look at the wording and it's consistent with that process, but it's for members to decide what they want to see in their minutes.
Are you happy with that, or at least satisfied?
I mean, I'm not entirely clear from that. You know, I prefer to see a bit more advice, perhaps written down to come back to consider at another meeting to defer the minutes till our next DC.
I think, Chair, the point I'd make is that in the same way as members are familiar with what happened on the 31st of May, I would guess that they're equally familiar with what happened on the 5th of July, and they will be able to form a view now, I'd suggest, on whether what's recorded in the minutes, the draft minutes before them, and whether that corresponds with their understanding of the discussion on the 5th of July and the outcome on the 5th of July. If members don't feel they're in that position, then obviously they will delay the approval or discussion of these minutes to a later date. But based on where we are with this application and where we are with the decisions that have been taken, my instinct is that members may already have enough information, but their perception may be different.
My feel is members were a bit aware and happy with the lack of clarity they perceived on the 31st of May, but there is a far greater clarity, whether some of them like it or not, in the 5th of July minutes, of course. Councillor O'Rourke.
Thank you. Once again, you know, I wasn't at the meeting, but I did watch it, and in a way, maybe that gives me an unusual perspective, because what I'm concerned about is, you know, that we do have our procedures and our protocols in a way that allows the public to come here in meetings and participate, and You know, when you watch both of the meetings, it's quite clear that in the first one, we've now agreed that the decision was to refuse and that the officer was going to come back with reasons. And then when you watch the second meeting in July, when it starts off, I read the reports that were published beforehand, so the public all understood that this meeting was about to just only discuss the reasons for refusal. So when the public forum started at that meeting, the public weren't here. You know, there were lots of representations from people related to the development, but the public weren't here. And then the officer began his report, and he began a meeting which was about the reasons for refusal. And then, with all due respect, Chair, I was a bit flummoxed as to see what I was watching, because you began a very different meeting, and that meeting was where we're going to discuss this whole procedure again, but not really discuss it because we were going to limit the amount of discussion. So on this set of minutes, if it comes to it and it votes, I won't be able to vote for it. I will abstain. But I would also want to put on the record that I don't think that the procedures were transparent enough and that the public were there, and that was, you know, that's not the meeting that we should have been having. It wasn't the meeting that the public expected. The public weren't here. And I do think that there is a legal blowback on us for not having a meeting that the people expected and they didn't turn up for it, and we're making decisions. And I'm very interested to hear what Councillor Geisha says. You know, this is a new idea to me. If you're saying, if we didn't can we make the decision again? I mean, that's sort of a rhetorical question, but maybe it's not, because I don't really quite know where you were going with that, Councillor Geisha. But I don't really feel that what happened that day was true and right, and therefore I wouldn't be voting for those minutes either, because I think that the first minutes, the fall of the first minute does really have a consequence.
Roy,
Chair, thank you.
I don't want to preempt you, so please say whatever you were going to. But my understanding of the cooling off process, although technically they were two meetings, that they were united because we were assessing and determining the planning application before us. So any public forum considered on the first occasion equally should have informed the determination on the second.
Yes, Chair, that is correct. I think that the more discreet point that I was going to say in response to Councillor O'Rourke is that she appears to be concerned about two separate issues. First, she's concerned about the content of the minutes and whether they're an accurate representation, which is the issue we're all concerned about generally. But second, I think she's concerned about whether the process that was followed on the 5th of July in terms of the report and the discussion was actually a proper discharge of the Council's planning functions. And in my view, those are two different things. As we discussed tonight, the purpose of the minutes is to record the discussion. Whether or not the meeting was legally correctly conducted or legally flawed, that's a separate issue. Even if it's accepted, and I don't accept it, but even if it's accepted it's legally flawed, the purpose of the minutes is just to record what happened, not to be used as an opportunity to correct or to highlight legal issues which were inherent in the process.
Right. So can I move... Sorry, Fabian.
Just quickly, like Councillor O'Rourke, I will abstain because I wasn't there. But I think, as you pointed out, I normally sit on DCB, and we have had these kind of processes happen a number of times, and there have been occasions where we've been minded to go one way, it's come back, we've looked at it again, and then we've gone another way. But what is important, and I think it's for those of you who are there to make sure of this, is that while that does happen, you need to be, given the controversy, especially given the controversy, you need to be explicit, you need to be very clear as to why the decision went from here to here. That needs to be in the minutes. So anyone picking up the minutes can say, okay, even if they don't agree with the decision that was made, they can actually see how it arrived, how it happened, and why. I think that is really important, because we've all had situations where we've not liked a decision on planning, or you vote against something and everyone else votes for and it goes ahead, or the reverse of that. We all have those situations. You know, it's just, I think, really important that the whole audit trail, as it were, of how you got there is laid out, so that there is at least understanding of what happened, even if there was an agreement on it.
Fine. John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted a point of clarification from Councillor O'Rourke when she said she wasn't sure where I was going. I think just in relation to Councillor Breckles, it was just a case of, you know, I'm assured that legally and procedurally we followed everything that we should have done in the right order, but there's clearly a lot of feeling about this application and what may or may not have happened and why people did or didn't turn up. And my question about being able to, you know, look at an application again until the notice was given was just regarding, and I'm new to this, so bear with me, but Rule 12.1, the motion to rescind a previous decision, and whether we could just, you know, maybe that rule isn't relevant to planning, but it's on the CRM list of rules, as to whether we could just, and again, the outcome will probably be exactly the same, but if that would help clear up and have us spend less time debating the minute elements of it.
Right, I'm keen to actually, I'm conscious the good people of Eastville are waiting for their planning application. So the 5th of July minutes have actually been moved. Councillor Varney, are you still happy to second them?
Yes, I believe they are an accurate representation of what happened on the day. Whether or not I agree with the decision, they are an accurate representation of what happened. So yes, I will be seconding those minutes.
Fine. So I'll be voting in favour. Philippa?
In favour.
Laura?
For.
John?
For.
Andrew?
For.
Tom?
Abstain.
And V?
For.
Those are overwhelmingly carried. May I thank members for that debate, of course. We now move to, I don't know if the public gallery, they're very welcome to stay, but if your primary concern was this, you might want to leave. I'll just pause for 30 seconds while people leave. Right, we'll move to item 5, the action sheet. There are a number of items on there. Actually, the third item is a repetition of the first item, shouldn't be there. And under appeals would talk about the Wyville Garden Centre appeal, so we'll leave that. Simone, can I ask you to just stress the issue of the enforcement benchmarking report?
So, I propose to tell you about a survey from the Royal Town Planning Institute that has surveyed 103 local authorities, and the outcome of it was to report that almost 90% of local authorities surveyed are struggling with a backlog of enforcement cases. And also 70% of those local authorities surveyed have reported difficulties with recruiting enforcement officers. So I think that clearly demonstrates that, unfortunately, we're not the only ones in that dire position. I suppose what we don't know is it equally as bad as everywhere? We know we are really struggling. Our resources in enforcement and elsewhere are very stretched. And I therefore propose to use this as the benchmarking survey and rather concentrate our very limited resource on the enforcement, to take enforcement action, but to maybe revisit this at a later point again.
I'm conscious, Simone, members, particularly last year, but up to today have raised concerns about the delivery of the enforcement service here in Bristol. They wanted to actually see how we compare with other authorities. I accept what you say, of course, that it is very much a resource issue, and we're probably not that dissimilar to other local planning authorities. But my instinct would be this is something I don't want to take officers to take their eye off the ball. But if you certainly could come back to this, keep it on your radar.
Absolutely, and I'm happy to circulate the link as well, or to include the link in the minutes, so you can look at it yourself. But this is a difficult area that is, as I said, recognised nationally as well. I mean, it's one of the reasons as well why the government has, over the summer, brought about the Planning Skills Development Fund, to which we've also put a bid in. But yeah, I think I would propose come back maybe in 6 months' time or so, because I don't think there'll be much, that we can do before then.
I would suggest well, hopefully these are not quite so contentious minutes, but if you could put that link in the future minutes of this meeting, that's great. Tom?
Yes, thanks. I agree that it's important to focus resource and to come back to this at a later date. But you mentioned that we'd put a bid in for what was the fund called? Sorry.
Planning Skills Development Fund, and it's specifically for, well, it had two categories: tackling the backlog, where the bigger, where more money was available, so to speak, or skills. So we have bid for the backlog fund, so to get maximum support on tackling the backlog.
So it's just for tackling the backlog, not for additional enforcement support?
Ultimately, it's the backlog is across DM and enforcement, so we could, the two kind of are to an extent interrelated, but arguably the conventional, shall we say, DM backlog is even greater, and therefore that's where we're currently prioritising. But this is not something, it's something that we're keeping constantly under review so that we can adequately deal with all the critical enforcement issues.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Andrew.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, thank you, Simone. Yeah, I understand that this is not an issue that only Bristol is facing, that local authorities across the country are struggling with enforcement. But I think also in Bristol, I get the impression, I've heard this from different sources, that there is a cultural reluctance to pursue enforcement for fear of litigation that the council might lose. And I just want to be assured that that's not the case, that, where there are breaches, the council will respond robustly and go along the enforcement route. Because we get comments from members of the public who say, oh, what's the point? Developers get away with it all the time, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to kind of counter that kind of perception with a robust enforcement strategy. I understand we're short-staffed, there's a backlog, but we need to make sure there isn't a cultural reluctance as well to pursue enforcement. Thank you.
Absolutely, we have to completely pursue enforcement, and I would also say we are, as I said, we're having to prioritise our limited resources on the most pressing and acute, most sort of community impact issues. But I think as we're getting on to, and as some of the appeals will actually demonstrate, quite effectively. And, where we've got a very small team, we've fortunately been able to recruit one officer over the summer, which does at least a little bit to stem the exodus that we have suffered from before. But yeah, our very lean enforcement team, I think, is doing a great job. They're punching above their weight, so to speak.
Thanks a lot. Can we move on to item 7, enforcement? Again, Simone, could you highlight anything you wish?
sorry, let me just bring up the right screen. I think, and it's also under appeals, I think the key highlight, and I think it's a real highlight to note, is that the Wyvale Garden Centre enforcement appeals have actually been, we've won them, and that where the inspector have upheld our enforcement notices. There were 4. On one of them, we are having to reissue the notice because there was a technical omission in it, which actually it was helpful that it wasn't upheld and that we can reissue it now in an improved version. But yeah, I think that is again a real success and demonstrates the point, that on the key issues they are being pursued and we're being upheld because of the quality work that the team is doing.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, thank you so much, Simone. So yes, on the Wyvale Garden Centre in my ward, Brislington West, there were 4 enforcement notices that were being appealed. So 54, 55, 56. 57 then is the one that hasn't been dismissed at this point. I thought it might have been a typo with the line, but that actually hasn't been dismissed. It's 3 out of 4 at the moment.
It's not been dismissed, it's been quashed, which just means we have to reissue it and in a corrected form, and that is what the team are working on, as a priority. You'll also be aware that there is a parallel outline planning application that also is being worked on and actively progressed. So, yeah, again, the teams are working as hard as they can in resolving these very complex issues.
So just a quick question. So with regards to the appeals being dismissed on 3 of those 4 enforcement notices, what happens next? I mean, do the developers have another chance to kind of delay, or is there a time period by which they have to comply with those enforcement notices?
No, this is where the team is now working again with the applicants to actually enforce those notices, so that to ensure that they comply. And also they're still visiting because we are aware that there's further, we've been made aware of further breaches, so that is all being investigated and dealt with.
And is there a time limit by which they have to deal with the enforcement notices?
Not that I'm aware of, but no.
I've got 2 points about appeals. Firstly, item 64, Hop House Close Henleys, the Airbnb appeal. This was refused by DCB earlier this year, and I'm pleased to see the appeal was dismissed, so that's gratifying news. The other item of questions, Simone, is 67127 East Dundry Road, Whitchurch. Was that a delegated refusal or a committee refusal?
As far as I know, that was a non-determination appeal, and therefore, it was.
Oh, right.
It actually never came that far.
Okay, that's fine. Do other members have a Tom?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just on those lines, obviously there are quite a few appeals, or seemingly quite a few appeals on our list against non-determination. Is that related directly to the backlog? And, do you see those? How is the backlog going, basically?
They are directly related to the backlog, absolutely, because on the non-determination, there is basically a time period within which we have to deal with an application, and if it's not dealt with within that time, then the applicant has the right to appeal to the inspectorate to make the decision. We are very aware of that, because in a way it is actually it's a further drain on our very limited resource, and therefore it is, it's pulling us into a downward spiral. We are, as I said, very aware, and therefore we've been working hard on bringing in extra resource, which has been very difficult in a very challenging, again, nationally challenging recruitment market. But we have had some success, and that is, and and we're also bringing in extra consultants capacity and so on. You know, everything we can do, again, with also limited financial resources, and are now looking to apply that so that we can stem those appeals. But
So,
we are dealing with a very big backlog.
yeah. So would you say, in terms of the number of appeals against non-determination, are we through the worst of it, or is there more to come?
I couldn't promise you at this moment that we're through the worst of it, but we will do our hardest. We'll do our best, and work our hardest to stem it.
John.
Yeah, just a quick question. As far as the backlog goes, can I ask, do you work through them sequentially in the order they came in? Or
We don't. We prioritise on a number of criteria, but largely sort of also public interest, community interest, community impact, economic impact.
So they're kind of
Clearly
triaged.
also sequentially, as far, or chronologically, as far as we can, because clearly we can't keep the oldest one waiting forever, but there is still a balance to be had to make sure that those applications which are of a high community interest don't get caught up to the same extent.
I only asked because I had a resident that just wanted to drop the curb for medical reasons because they couldn't park anywhere near their house. And it just went on and on and on. So that must tell you what the backlog's like if something like that gets pushed so far back.
I mean, the other point to note, though, is that we actually have very limited knowledge about the applications while they're stuck in the backlog. So this is something else we're currently working on. How can we fish out, so to speak, those quick ones that we should be able to turn around very quickly and therefore shouldn't get held up. But again, it's still a balance to be had.
We move briefly to item 7, enforcement, where 2 enforcement notices are recorded. Do you have anything to add? No. Right. In that case, we move to item 8, public forum for the Stonebridge Park application. Can I say to everyone here who's here for this, thank you for your patience. It's certainly longer than one would normally expect, of course, but again, thank you for that. As you probably picked up from the previous public forum, when I call your name, if you make your way to the central mic, and that's already switched on, so you need do nothing. Stand about probably 4 inches behind it and speak. We have received your full public forums before members have had a day to read them. So if you could summarise your statements, please, in no more than 1 minute, that would be appreciated. So the first person I have is Mary Stevens. Mary? No. Second one, Councillor Francis, I see is there.
Thank you, Chair. So my name is Lorraine Francis, I'm Councillor in East Ward, and I'm supporting the residents in their concerns about this development. Whilst the development will be presented positively, it's a lovely build, etc. There's something about this space in itself and the impact that there's already a 21-bed level 1 unit, there's a further level 2 unit, 5-bed house, and there are now asking residents who are incredibly tolerant to accept another build. I don't know if you've done a site visit, but I would have suggested that councillors had members have the opportunity to look at the space, because on paper it sounds wonderful, but there are issues about flooding. No matter what's said, there are issues about previous green spaces being taken down for surveys, etc., which could have been done in a different way. So this is about impact on residents that are already accepted.
Lorraine, do you mind? Thanks. Abby Bartlett, please.
Hello everyone.
I appreciate that Bristol's got a significant housing problem, and I support the need for social and supportive housing in our city, but I think that the facility as it stands is as big as our community can manage. There's a large unit, I thought it was 27, 21, unit to the rear of the road, and then 27 on the street as well. We're often disturbed by low-level antisocial behaviour, and when I have time I address this with the team at number 27A. As my children have become more independent and able to come and go from the house without me being with them, they've been intimidated and shouted at by people from number 27A. One particular evening, my daughter was saying goodbye to friends who was outside our home, and somebody started shouting at them and banging on the car. I've witnessed people urinating in the street and dropping litter. My children should be able to stand outside their home without being abused. I question the rationale behind this proposal and ask whether it's focused on the well-being of people in need of this service and their recovery. Won't being in close proximity of people earlier in their recovery
Abby, do you mind summing up, please?
Sorry. When people being, if you're further along in your journey and you're living next door to people who are starting their recovery journey, isn't that a contradiction in care?
Thank you. Asiya Jawed, and I'm sorry if I've mispronounced that.
Hi. My family and I, we live opposite the 5-bed house number 27 Stonebridge Park, and also close to the entrance of the rehab centre, which has already been internally modified to accommodate more of the users. Antisocial behaviour day and night, such as foul language, shouting, drinking, vomiting, and use of drugs are just only some of the issues that we face. Even while writing this statement today, I could hear shouting from the users, which I could hear from inside my house with the windows closed. Poor management of the rehab centre, lack of reaching out to the local community, environmental impact, and increased site traffic are just some of the other issues which cannot be ignored. Stonebridge Park residents are mostly families. We are already stressed due to the current situation, which is affecting ours and our children's quality of life. We are entitled to be protected in body and mind and have a right to live in a clean and safe environment. We need better quality of life for everyone. This requires more focus on current users of the rehab centre. It has already reached its toppling point.
Thank you.
Adding more is dangerous.
Thank you for your time.
And will just lead to disastrous consequences.
Thank you. Do we have PJ Tyler? PJ Tyler, no. Katie Proctor.
Good evening. Places for People have operated a support service for Stonebridge Park for 23 years, and in the last 5 years we've supported 135 people into independent accommodation. Bristol City Council nominates all customers through the Housing Support Register, and we work with other organisations so that customers get timely support when they need it most. We have strong management processes and an experienced team in place, with the additional units benefiting from 2 additional full-time staff. We absolutely understand the concerns raised about the proposal, however we don't agree with them. Highways officers have confirmed that there is no impact on highway safety, and we have amended the proposal to ensure that there is no impact on residential amenity. We will continue to promote open communication between us, the police, and the community to deal with any reports of antisocial behaviour. Alternative accommodation provision has been considered, however is not viable. The proposal meets planning policy requirements. It will deliver huge social value as well as significant environmental and economic benefits. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rashid, or Mrs. Sorry.
Hi everyone. I live directly opposite the facility on 27A, and I'm one of the most affected neighbours. On a daily basis, myself and my family experience abusive behaviour, shouting, swearing and a lot of noise. This experience is both during the night and during the day. We cannot open our windows at night because the noise wakes us up and we feel unsafe. No one should feel
unsafe in their own homes. My children are really scared of going outside the house alone, as they have previously been approached by drugged and drug residents of the facility and experienced antisocial behaviour. No child should have to deal with this. The facility is poorly managed and does not take responsibility for their residents. Recently, I called the facility to complain about the noise, and they refused to help and told me to call the police. Many times in the morning I have experienced empty beer cans at my doorstep, indicating that someone was on my property while I was asleep. I've also seen fully drugged and drunk residents on my driveway and even in my garden. This is unacceptable, and we do not deserve to be subject to such behaviour. The relocation of the bins, which will be visible from the street and my house, is again concerning. No one wants to be living next to a stack of bins and have to deal with littering, smell and not a nice view.
Sorry, Mrs. Rashid, can I bring you to a close, please?
Okay. Extending the facility will only make things worse. Stonebridge Park is dealing with a lot of issues that should be addressed by the council and the rehab centre. We all understand that we have a house in crisis at the moment, but however, Stonebridge Park should not bear this alone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And finally, Mr. Ledem.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me. I'm a resident too. I've moved to Stonebridge Park in 2006. So for the last 16 years, I've been caring, I've been helping, I've been nursing, and I've been complaining, and I've been supporting, and I've been helping, and I've been complaining. We are at a point where we cannot or can no longer continue that trend. We need support. Back in November, we had a meeting with the care provider at the very address to discuss the potential increase in capacity. I personally explained my case, and the response I got was, don't be tolerant. Don't be tolerant. And that came from the operator of that particular facility. So tonight, for the first time in my life, I'm not going to be tolerant. Okay? Sorry. Although the planning committee appears to favour the development due to energy efficiency and on-grabbing opportunities on site, the project seriously lacks the ambition of a truly sustainable project. One that promotes true value of holistic community engagement and consideration, the one that Bristol City aspire to do. So far, we haven't had any social value reinvested into the street, nor into the presentation of the facility. There is no contact whatsoever with it, trying to improve the solution. We are always challenged with all the claims we put forward.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
So can I thank the residents and actually the applicant for presenting there. Can I now move to the case officer? Angelo, do you want to present verbally the presentation?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I have a short presentation just to run through some of the key issues. The reasons that the application has been presented to committee well, there's a couple of reasons. It was called in by the ward councillor, but also we've had a significant number of objections, 54 objections, so we would have took this forward to committee. The main issues for concern are the crime and anti-social behaviour issues that you've heard. The impact on ecology and tree removal, in particular there was some removal of vegetation and trees prior to submission of the application. There are concerns with noise impacts on properties adjacent to the site and concerns with an increase in traffic. So just to give you an idea, you probably all know where it is. So the existing building that places for people operate from is here. It's 27 bed site. The application site was also situated on an area of open space. It's the Royats Hill Open Nature Reserve. Just to give you an idea, this looks, you should have seen these plans in the package of documents included with the papers. So this gives you an idea of the location of the units. So that's one of the issues, is because it is located on allocated open space. So there is a negative impact of the scheme. The plan also shows you improvements to the access lane. There's a bin store which they are creating within the rear garden of the other property that they support. and that will enable also them to widen the footpath along that side for improved highway safety. Just run through some elevations. So the buildings are a single story. They're what's called MMC units, which are modern methods of construction, so they're panelized units that get delivered to site. On the bottom right image, you can sort of see they're sort of on stilts, which is an easier form of construction. The dwellings are not typical dwellings. They're approximately 23 square meters in size, but I'll talk about that in a second. Just to give you an idea of some photos of the sites, that's the access lane. So on the left is where the bin store would go, and there will be a widening of the footpath because they're taking some of the land in that garden there to do that. And the image on the right was taken, I think, by the enforcement team when the works were carried out, removing some vegetation and some trees, which are all covered in the ecological reports that have been submitted and considered. So just show you the floor plan. So these are units. Sizes are approximately about 24 square meters. The occupiers will have access to shared facilities in the main building. Because it's this is a C2 use class, we wouldn't apply normal space standards, which is only applicable to C3 dwellings. This is some visual representations that the applicant has provided in the reports. Probably just make out, I don't know how well you can see that. They're in brown. So the impact of the view from the hill to the south, and that's from the access lane. So what we consider that impact is not significant in terms of design and impact on the character of the area. Just to point out, so you're aware, that's the local plan allocation. I couldn't easily map them on, but I think from showing you the other plan, you've got a good idea where exactly those buildings are going. So essentially, we've got a planning balance issue. So there is conflict with the development plan, slight conflict. There's a negative impact of the proposal due to location on the allocated open space. But officers, we consider that the material considerations weigh in favour of the proposal. So we have the additional housing, the urgent need for the type of accommodation, which is given significant weight and what we call the tilted balance. There is a management plan, and additional staff will be employed to address issues with on-site behaviour of occupants. We've had no objections raised by the local police and pollution control officers. There's a positive BNG score of 21%, which also include 56 trees, a minimum to be planted on site. The site is in a sustainable location within walking distance of shops on the main Fishbombs Road and bus routes. As mentioned, there are sustainable methods of construction, on-site renewable energy generation, which will result in a 56% saving on residual energy use. So officers are recommending approval subject to conditions, but just to be minded that we're requesting delegated authority from you members to approve if you're minded to, as we've had to carry out further consultation because there was an issue with the red line. So we had to re-consult. That expires on the 21st. Which is tomorrow. So we're asking for the delegated authority to take that decision, whatever decision you take forward.
Thank you, Andrew. Move to questions. I've got two just to kick off. It does seem to me that the main, it's not a material planning consideration, but residents clearly are concerned about ASB and the impact upon their residential amenity. I appreciate having attended with other members the briefing last week that 2 new permanent members of staff will be employed to actually provide full support. What confidence can we have that the applicant will actually manage this development very closely?
Yeah, so that's correct. There's 2 further new people, members of staff. So I think there's a total of 12 members of staff, and we've been advised that there's 24/7 care, and we have to take what the applicant is saying on face value, essentially that they will manage the property in line with their management plan, and we will be conditioning the management plan in perpetuity.
And the other bit of information I picked up last week was there has been concerns raised about construction disturbance to neighbours. My understanding is a particular type of prefabricated accommodation may lead to a reduction in the time of any build of 40% or so, so presumably this is less of a concern for officers.
The modular build is very quick, and therefore the construction wouldn't be a grounds for us to object because it's actually far more efficient in time, and the way the building of the where the modular is going to be placed is the only real main construction with noise and everything, and that's quite quick. So notwithstanding the other issues, construction would not be a recommended reason for refusal from my experience.
Thanks, Pep. Tom.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. There's a couple of questions that have sort of bubbled up in my mind around the ASB and the impact, the potential impact on residential amenity. So you mentioned that there will be a condition on a management plan kept in perpetuity, and I just wondered, how does that management plan go above and beyond what existing management plans they have at the moment? And there was a mention of an amendment to the design to address potential impact on residential amenity. It'd be useful if you could just touch on that, and if there are any specific conditions we're proposing that look at noise mitigation, or any design considerations that have been made for noise mitigation.
So, I forgot your first question now. I think it was about...
Yeah, about the management plan.
Management plan, yeah. So the management plan, I'm not 100% certain if it's an existing management plan or it's an adaptation or it's a new management plan. But there is a requirement that there's a management plan included with the application. So you'll be able to see that. So that's what we're conditioning. I don't know. I would assume it's an existing management plan. The impact on neighbours. What in particular impacts in terms of the structures themselves? Because they are.
It was mentioned, I think, in one of the public forum statements about a amendment to the design to address the impact on residential amenity. I just wondered if that...
not been any, because they're single story in nature, that there's no real impact in terms of shadowing or overlooking to neighbouring properties as such. So we've not sought any amendments to the structures themselves. In terms of noise mitigation, there's not been any objections raised by the pollution control officers. I think the units are, in terms of they're quite airtight, the units themselves. So I'm assuming they have good sound insulation, but there wasn't any objections raised by the officers, so we've not raised that as a concern.
Farah.
Yeah, I think I was just following on from Councillor Hathaway. Basically, with obviously a lot of the residents do have concerns with this antisocial behaviour, and we're talking about the management plan. Can part of that management plan be like security cameras as well, just to tighten up? Can we have a condition to put that in?
There are CCTV. We can condition that.
Yeah, I mean, like
there's CCTV proposed, and the police have commented that there are CCTV proposed.
Unfortunately, technically, legally, we can't have a dialogue, but thank you. Farah, have you finished?
I finished.
Fine. Paula.
I've got 3 questions, if that's okay, and actually one of them is slightly related to that, because in the crime prevention design advisor has commented that I'm happy that the applicant has paid due regard to designing out crime. I would be happy to discuss further the potential for achieving the Secured by Design Developers Award. And I wondered whether we could put that as a condition that they went for that, because that would give some sort of sense of security. And so can we condition that? Second question, it was to do with the bins. I'm not quite sure whether I picked it up there quickly enough, but and apologies if I got it wrong. But were you saying that the bins are going to be on the street?
No, sorry, what? Hold on. See where that fence is?
Yeah.
So essentially, there'll be something that looks like this on that side. So it's a timber enclosed structure. Can you see it here? So if you can you imagine you were looking down that way, and you were looking to that. There's a fence there at the moment. So there'll be the bin store will be going within.
Oh, completely enclosed on the inside.
So it would look.
There's no fear of.
So it will look like this.
Okay.
If to give you an idea of what it looks like. So it's sort of like behind that fence.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Okay, because I just thought that one of the statements that I read, people were saying that they're going to be looking out at bins, and I really wouldn't want that.
It would be an enclosure. We can condition that. And that actually, you just reminded me. I'll add the condition for the bin store.
Okay.
We will do that.
Okay, and then my third question, it's a bit vaguer really, but it's about it being designated open space. I bring my experience of being on the Downs for many years, and there's always so much pressure on the fact that you can only use this open space for a sort of ancillary type use. And I just wondered, is there a further burden on this application to be, I don't know, more necessary, more worthy, more linked to the open space? How can we just build anything we want on designated open space?
The proposal is contrary to that policy because it is not ancillary to the open space. So there's that negative, and you've got all the other local plan policies.
Okay.
And then you balance that.
So it's about the weight.
If I might contribute, from the briefing, I seem to recall the applicant was saying one of the reasons they thought it was appropriate here was actually they wanted to have a scheme quite close to the open space, which would contribute to the tenants' mental well-being. Fabian.
Yeah, there's been questions. I do agree with Paula about secured by design and conditioning that. I think that is essential. I was just wondering, who's the accommodation for? Because there's one category of people in recovery on the site already. Is this for a different category of of supported care for people with different needs or less needs?
It's not included. The categorisation of the people in the site isn't clear in the submission, but I'm assuming it's the same category of people that are already on the existing facility.
Certainly at the briefing, Fabian, the applicant was very definite it was a low needs score of people. Sorry. I wasn't sure whether it was Andrew or John I had next. John?
Yeah, I just wanted to, the biggest thing for me was the allocated open space originally, and I'm surprised there wasn't more in public forum around the open space issue. But I just wanted to understand from a planning officer's point of view, how much weight needs to counteract something that just isn't allowed to happen. Because in the list of things to mitigate that, it's got a management plan with additional staff, but we don't know what the management plan is or how it differs from what they've currently got in place. And the site is sustainable, and I'd argue it's sustainable because it's an open space. So I'm just looking at kind of the things that outweigh something I thought you weren't allowed to do, and it's urgent need for housing, which we all know, or accommodation, and sustainable methods of construction, which I would hope somebody would do anyway. So I'm just trying to understand in your mind how you've weighed up the positives against something that technically shouldn't happen in the first place.
Great weight is placed on the need for housing, and because we can't provide, we've got such a shortfall in housing provision, we give it substantial weight, basically. So,
just to add, because our local plan is so old, the NPPF, so the National Planning Policy Framework, kicks in, and again, because we haven't got the 5-year housing land supply, Angela is absolutely right. It's great weight that we have to give to it, and it's the presumption in favour where it's a sustainable development, and therefore, yeah, great weight needs to be given to that.
A lot of the objections from residents, understandably, appear to be around the current management of current premises, which, given there's so many of them complaining, does seem to be subpar, shall we say, politely. Is there anything we can do to try and improve that for future provision? Because it doesn't seem to be working. I mean, people's concerns and fears are based on their current experience rather than on the actual planning application itself, if you see what I mean. I mean, what powers do we have within the planning authority to do something to reassure them? Or is it an entirely different department, would you say? I mean, my guess is an entirely different department. They've got to complain to whoever it is in the council who's paying for this provision, which presumably is happening. But because I think we all feel for people, and we all exactly know we've all had cases in our wards where this happens, but I'm not sure that the planning framework is something that can really help them in this. Am I right? That was rambling, and I apologise. I'm just trying to...
So it's a material consideration. Crime and safety are a material consideration. Obviously, there's lots of different factors involved, because obviously the behaviour of people outside of normally we just look at the behaviour of people within a use or a property. So there's issues here with how people behave outside of site. So that the police would be involved in that. So that is separate from planning. And yeah, so it's a material consideration. It's just how much weight you give it.
Shall I just add? Clearly, by the management plan being made a condition, it can become an enforcement matter as well. So if there was a clear breach established, that could then be enforced against. But that would, as part of, we would always advise first that where issues occur to take it up with the provider in the first place. But as an ultimate recourse, so to speak, the condition does secure the compliance, and where clearly our statutory consultees have given us assurance that they are content with what has been provided.
I've got Philippa, Fabian, and then Tom.
Just for you really sort of asked what I was going to ask, but just to sort of drill down a bit more deeply, well, just to have a simple answer in a way. So is the possibility of further antisocial behaviour a material planning consideration?
I would say it's more around the likelihood that it can be controlled and whether the controls being put forward are, the confidence that we can have in them. And our statutory advisors, as I said, the pollution control officer and the police have both signalled that they are satisfied with what's being put forward. And I think it's in that light that you need to look at it.
The question was, just confirming, when it says it's in a sustainable location, does that mean it's relative? That's saying it's relatively near bus stops and 15-minute walk from the high street and things, isn't it? Is that correct?
That's why, yeah. So you wouldn't need day-to-day need for a car, for example.
Thanks.
Fabian.
Yeah. Just a further question that came up. Given the open space and given that these would partially be on the open space at the back of the application site, would that set a precedent on other open space applications regarding other open spaces?
Each application has to be considered on its merits. So there's no such thing as a precedent technically in planning. So you have to assess every other application on its own. And it may have similar issues, again, housing, the weight given to the issues. This doesn't set a precedent for how we approach the other sites.
Tom.
Thank you. My question was just about the density of this type of development and how it compares to other, other developments in the city for, that care for these people with these specific needs. Is this a particularly big concentration of people undergoing that sort of care? And then the other one was just on your planning balance slide. you mentioned that there's a positive BNG and 56 trees planted. I just wanted to clarify, because in the report it says that there's a minimum of 56 trees planted, so I don't want to give that more weight than it's due if that's just meeting the minimum standard for the tree replacement.
So to clarify onto density, I can't give you any figures on exactly what density this is compared to other ones in the city for this type of C2 use. In terms of the trees, for the Bristol tree replacement standard, they need to plant 51 trees. To get a positive BNG score, they're proposing 56 trees. They've said they can plant 100 saplings, so as a minimum, in the condition, we're saying 56 as a minimum. So they could choose to plant more.
Right. Could I therefore suggest we move to the debate? I'll kick off, shall I? I suspect we all feel a bit similar here. In planning terms, we all know the need for actually housing, particularly supportive housing for homeless people, is important, very important, of course. And the fact it is supported and people aren't being left alone purely to get on with their own lifestyles has got to be important too. The location seems to be sustainable to me. I understand the rationale in terms of the open space, of course, and why they're proposing that. But I'm also, like Tom indicated and sought to highlight, they're meeting the number of Bristol tree standard replacement trees, so that's good in my book. The key issue for me is the experience and the fears of the nearby residents about ASB. Realistically, it's limited what we can do. I do like Paula's idea about adding a condition it's secure by design standard. I think that's important. I also think we ought to ensure, Angelo, that whatever management plan, which is, as Simone said, is enforceable, is as robust as possible to support and protect the interests of nearby residents. But overall, if those conditions are actually met, I'll be voting in favour of this. Andrew?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, I concur with what you've just said. I think this scheme appears to be policy compliant in pretty much every regard, apart from the fact that it's located on important open space. Obviously, the planning balance applies, and I agree with the officer's report that, it's clear that with a waiting list of 19,000 households for social housing in Bristol, 1,200 households in temporary accommodation, we have to give that great weight. I'm not happy that we're proposing to develop an open space. I'm also very concerned to hear the reports of local residents, and I would implore the operators of the site to to try to improve relationships with local people. Obviously, we're limited in what we can do as a planning authority, but I think that would be a really crucial step to take, to try and work with local residents to improve relationships. And I'm pleased to see there will be an enhanced, we believe, management plan with extra staff. So I will be supporting this development. Thank you.
Hey, Bill.
Yeah, now I'm satisfied it doesn't settle a precedent, and with suggestions about secured by design, which I think we need to add to the conditions, and I think also we need to explicitly say that the management plan must be stronger than the current one and enforceable. So clearly the current management plan isn't good enough, given the feedback from residents, so it has to be cranked up to 11. So that, I think, is the important thing. And if we do that, we do have a housing crisis. I'm having housing's being built behind my place. It's being built all over the place. We're always, with the huge numbers that need housing and the need to get the vulnerable, the homeless people actually off the streets and into on some way of getting their lives together. This kind of development is crucial as long as it's managed correctly. So I think if we can make it very clear that delegation must mean, consult police, social services, whoever, housing services, about how to make the management plan as tough as it needs to be to allay the fear, to curb, not just to prevent any ASB increasing, but actually to curb and roll back some of the ASB that the people are already experiencing. There needs to be gain for the residents, and a much tougher management plan would give the local residents some gain, I think, and I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. And if that can all be met, I'll be supporting the application.
John?
Yeah, I just want to echo what's been said and just, kind of reiterate the fact that whilst the concerns of residents may not be material planning issues for us to reject this sort of application, we've kind of put together as robust a legal plan as we can to allay some of the problems that are happening as much as possible. But I'll be voting for it.
Paula?
Well, I'd just like to say that I think, with the fact that the statutory consultees have not given any grounds for objection, that really makes it very difficult. Obviously designated open space is very important to us, but I think we don't really have any. I don't think we have any option, but I feel that I don't have any other option but to vote for it if we can have the conditions put on about the bins and about the design for whatever it's called, secured by design. Have both of those conditions, and yes, and the robust management plan. And I think really it is down to what other people have said is the organisation running it need to have better communication and making the local residents happier. And if it's all there, that.
Sorry, we can't have the public involved. Sorry, I do apologise. Philippa.
I echo what everyone else is saying, and the residents have, clearly are suffering from some of this behaviour, and they have a right to feel safe in and around their homes. And I really think the management company, whatever their perception, if the local residents' perception is that they're not being dealt with properly, then I think the management company really do need to make some changes and to really listen to the neighbours. But as everyone else has said, that there are good reasons to support this because of the supply of homes that are so greatly needed. I think that's attached great weight to that.
I think I've got the mood of the chamber. Could I therefore formally move approval of the officer's recommended approval, subject actually to that design, secured by design principles and a very robust management plan, and a plea to the applicant, please. I do think we need to do everything possible to improve relations and communications with the neighbours, of course. Do I have a seconder? Fabian?
Yeah, happy to second, but also add the bit about the conditioning about the bins as well, and also make sure that there's proper consultation with subject matter experts about the kind of management plan that will actually deliver improvements, reductions in ASB.
I think that was implicit, but
make it explicit. But on those conditions, happy to second.
Fine. So can I move to the vote? John?
4.
Andrew?
4.
Tom?
4.
Paula?
4.
Fee?
4.
Farah?
4.
Philippa?
4.
Fabian?
4.
And I'll vote 4. Can I thank you for your involvement in the meeting? And I formally close this meeting. The next meeting of the committee on the 1st of November at 2 p.m.